Hi, this is Julie DeLeon from the Teaching and Learning Department. I'm the coordinator for Elementary Language Arts. I'd like to share with you some insights from Carl Anderson. He was recently in the district at Voigt Elementary for 2 days, covering Conferring with Writers, and I'd like to talk to you about what he spoke to us about on success rate in conferences. During the workshop, we also used How's It Going?, his book on conferring, as a tool and as a guide to help us understand and go deeper into what we learned with him. So Carl talks about how conferencing is really like coaching. And he says that kids need as much time as you can give them to write. They also need coaching. And so this is where the conference comes in. He talked about how if you have students, or if you have children of your own, you don't just drop them off at practice, like soccer practice or baseball practice. There's a coach there. And so he said that this is just like writing. Kids need a coach, and you don't just drop them off at practice. So in conferring, he talked a lot about what is your success rate. How successful are your students in taking away that teaching point that you give them in a conference and using it completely with 100% proficiency. He talked about if you have a low success rate, then we need to look at that, because you wouldn't want to go to a doctor that has a low success rate. You want a high success rate with your writers. So Carl suggested developing a conferring rhythm within your workshop. Here's an example on the screen. He talked about that you would meet with about 5 kids a day during their independent writing time. And this is how he does it. So he meets with student 1, they confer, he teaches the student into a teaching point, he coaches them through that strategy, and then he releases them to work independently on their writing and also thinking about that teaching point he just taught to them about. Just teach them, he gave them a strategy. And then he goes on to student 2. He goes through the same process, looking at the student work, setting a teaching point, coaching into that teaching point, that strategy, and then supporting the child with that, and then leaving them to work independently. After that student 2 conference, he'll go back and check on student 1. He wants to know specifically how that child is doing on the strategy that he just taught them, and if they're using it. This is an accountability piece, and this is what helps in having a high success rate in conferences. If a student needs that teaching point, if it's related to their overall goals as a writer, they need to be applying it. And if they're not, they need that coaching and that support to get them on track with that teaching point. After checking in on student 1, then he would go to student 3 and have his conference. And then after that conference is over, he goes back and checks on student 2 to see how is that child doing with the strategy that he taught. Are they applying it? Are they understanding it? Are they using it? Or do they need a little bit more scaffolding and coaching? Then he goes to student 4, he conferences with that student, and then he lets that student go to independently write and practice. And then he returns to student 3 to check in on their progress, how they do, are they applying it? Same thing as he's been doing on his other check-ins. And finally, he has student 5. After student 5, he will go back to student 4 and check in, and then after student 5, and then he checks in with student 4, there's the teaching share. And the teaching share is at the end of the workshop. So there's a couple of different things he can do there. He can, after student 5 is conferenced with, he can talk to student 4 and check in, or he can go ahead and have the teaching share and then check in on the students. So there's different variety there, but the point is to go back immediately that day after conferring with a child and see, are they applying what they're doing? Are they understanding it? Do they need more support? And really, this is what helps the success rate of students understanding what we're trying to have them do, because it's related to bigger goals for them as a writer. He also talks about during the time when you're conferring with kids, you need to be using your conferring notes. Here's some examples on the screen of what some look like that some people have used in their classroom. The importance of conferring is really keeping up with what you're doing with each child and helping you remember what you taught them for those accountability reasons, as well as looking as you're planning for future work, lessons such as mini lessons, small group, where to take that conference next. The conferring notes really inform lots of different decision making that you'll have to do as a teacher as you think about your writing instruction. So you can see on this page it talks about conferring notes on the left, so the name of the student. The C is for the compliment. What is it that you're going to let that child know that they're doing well as a writer? The TP is for the teaching point, and then the NS is the next step. So of course you'd have one teaching point that's probably related to whatever it is that you complimented them, and then you're going to really strategically, explicitly teach into this teaching point, giving them strategies, modeling it for them, showing them mentor text, and then making sure that they're able to apply it a little bit on their own before you leave them. There's a lot of gradual release taking place there. Next step would be notes for yourself on where do you want to head next with that child, and any notes that would help you. You can also see on the right side is a whole class. The neat thing about the whole class is that you have all the data there in front of you, and you can make decisions for the whole class in small groups based on these notes. So hopefully this has been helpful in just helping you see how we can have some systematic planning for conferences so that we have a high success rate. And I want to leave you with the thought that Carl Anderson spoke about, is that every 5 to 6 days we want to check in with writers again. And that means all kids. We want to, every 5 to 6 days, be able to check in and confer with students based on goals. And that those little check-ins after the main conference to see how they're doing are really important, especially the day of a conference, to really make sure that they're applying and understanding what it is that we want to teach them, and that's important, and it's related to their goals as a writer. So there's also going to be a video link attached in this folder, and so you can watch that. It's a conference that Carl had with a little girl at Voight in 4th grade named Catalina, and you can see how he strategically conferences with the student, how he breaks down a teaching point into a strategy, and how he supports her through that. And then you'll also see her leave, go work, and then come back with her work, and you can see how he checks in with her on that, which is an example of one little piece of that rhythm that he talks about on this slide.